Part 3, Chapter 14 of Short History of the Christian Church by John Fletcher Hurst. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 14. The Reformation in Italy. The Italians were prepared by Savonarola to give hearty credence to the new doctrines. He was born in Ferrara in 1452, and was executed in Florence in 1498. In 1484 he began to preach in Brescia on the Book of Revelation. In 1489 he removed to Florence, and became a monk in the convent of St. Mark. He was an eloquent pleader for the reformation of the Church, and showed no mercy in declaring against the corruptions of Rome. His great error lay in having interfered with the political convulsions of Florence. Not for his bold protest against immorality alone was he compelled to suffer. He became an object of political hostility on the part of Lorenzo and Pietro, of the Medici family, who had stood in charge of the Republic of Florence. Savonarola was at the head of a revolution against them. The people of Florence, who were witnesses of his pure and sacrificing life, believed in him fully, and supported him by their sympathy. Pietro de' Medici, unable to resist Savonarola alone, called to his aid the Pope, Alexander VI., who was already eager to suppress the Florentine monk. The brave reformer fell beneath the power of Rome. Savonarola had wrought alone. He held a free lance, and the power of his speech and the heroism of his life long survived his death. For the moral greatness of the man there was not, and could not be, a martyrdom. Venice was at this very time in the throes of the religious revolution. The works of Luther and his coadjutors were not only circulated, but even printed, along the Grand Canal. Some little skill was needful to escape papal interdiction. For example, the Loci Theologicae of Melanchthon, the Greek term into which he translated his name, after the usage of scholars, from his German name of Schwarzerd, or Black Earth, was translated into Italian and published under the almost undistinguishable but accurately Italianized name of I Principii della Theologia di Ipofilo de Terra Nigra. This work reached Rome, and was sold and read for a whole year with enthusiasm. When the copies were exhausted, an order was sent to Venice for a new supply. A Franciscan friar discovered the identity of the author with the German Melanchthon, and exposed it. Of course, Rome was not long in seeing the heresy and ordering the burning of the dangerous book. Chardon de la Rochette wrote, "My hostess, the good Mother Coletti, says her prayers every day before a beautiful miniature, which represents Luther on one side and Melanchthon on the other." Zwingli's works were circulated under the name of Coricius Cogelius, and Bousset's Psalms went abroad in Italy and France as the commentary of Aretius Felinus. Melanchthon was not astray when he wrote to George, Prince of Anhalt, "What libraries have been carried from the late fair into Italy, though the Pope has published fresh edicts against us." The war between the German Empire and Italy broke out in 1526, and in 1527 the imperial army sacked Rome itself, and for a long time occupied Naples. With this army there was a large number of Protestants. They carried the reform south of the Alps, and the contagion spread among the Italian peoples. We have positive proof that Melanchthon corresponded with the Venetian reformers in 1529, and that Modena was a Lutheran city. Italy was the native country of humanism, but the new scholarship was so negative, and manifested itself in the cultivated circles by such positive indifference towards all religious life, that the land, though rising in intelligence, drifted far from the gospel. The poems of Portano, Sannazaro, and Marcellus were nothing but fulsome praises of the gods of Greece and Rome. The clergy introduced the whole dead mythology of the pagan times into their sermons, and drew parallels between Jupiter Maximus and God the Father, Apollo and Jesus, and Diana and the Virgin Mary. The people were left in profound ignorance. Dante said of the preachers of his day, "E'en they whose office is to preach the gospel let the gospel sleep, and pass their own inventions off instead." In another place he became still more bold. The preacher now provides himself with store of jests and jibes, and, so there be no lack of laughter, while he vents them, his big cowl distends, and he has won the meed he sought. Could but the vulgar catch a glimpse the while of that dark bird which nestles in his hood, they scarce could wait to hear the blessing said, which word the dotards hold in such esteem. Of the moral condition of Rome, Petrarch exclaimed, "Foul nest of treason! Is there aught wherewith the spacious world is fraught, of bad or vile? 'Tis hatched in thee, who revellest in thy costly meats, thy precious wines and curious seats, and all the fruits of luxury." The Protestant doctrines spread rapidly through every part of Italy. In the extreme south, or Calabria, where the descendants of some Waldensian emigrants lived, the sympathy with the new doctrines was prompt and strong. In the north every important town numbered among its people some disciples of the German reformers. Ferrara, Modena, Florence, Bologna, Padua, Verona, Brescia, Milan, Lucca, and Venice had large numbers of devoted reformers, who were reading, praying, and consulting, hoping that the same good providence which had favored their spiritual fathers in Germany would bless their country. Lucca had, perhaps, more adherents to the reform than any other city. But Venice excelled all others in the distribution of the Scriptures. To Florence belonged the great honor of having three of its sons, Brucioli, Marmocini, and Teofilo, prepare each an Italian translation of the Scriptures. The version of Brucioli became the favorite. Among the firmest reformers were Ochino, Peter Martyr, Paleario, Pascali, and Vergerio. None were more fully the objects of suspicion than the two former, both of whom succeeded in leaving the country before the officers could arrest them. In no country of Europe were women so prominent in the advocacy of the Reformation as in Italy. There was one court, Ferrara, where the Duchess, Renata, was a firm adherent, and her court was in a quiet way a rallying place for all Protestants. Calvin visited her once, and afterwards kept up a correspondence, until the poor woman was banished for her loyalty to Protestantism. Other women were none the less true, and, either socially or by their writings, did all in their power to advance the new measures. Olympia Murata, Isabella Mauricia, Lavinia della Rovere, Madonna Maddalena, and Madonna Cherbina, both of the Orsini family, the learned Duchess Julia Gonzaga, and the brilliant Vittoria Colonna, were representatives of a large class of noble and heroic women, who were among the first to welcome the doctrines from the North, and also among the first to suffer for their devotion to them. The cause of the Reformation advanced just far enough to be recognized as an opposing and dangerous religious factor, when the orders went out from Rome for its forcible suppression. There was nowhere sufficient momentum to the new cause to organize a church or establish a formulary of doctrine, but there were indications enough to begin the work of resistance. In 1542, the Inquisition, which was already in operation in Spain, was ordered to begin in Italy. Carafa was put in charge of the work, and a more competent man could not be found. In every city where Protestants could be found, they were publicly executed, and without delay. Antonio Paleario, a prominent humanist, but of intense religious convictions, was burned. The powerful little treatise, The Benefit of Christ's Death, was formerly attributed to him. It had an immense circulation, but was suppressed, and every copy, as was supposed, destroyed. A copy was discovered in Cambridge, England, in 1853, and it has been sent back to Italy to shed its light again in sweet revenge. The book issued from the reformatory circle at Naples, and was written by a disciple of Valdez. Paschali suffered a like fate. As a result, by the end of the century, nearly every trace of Protestantism was suppressed. The Council of Trent was the papal method of dealing with Protestantism outside of Italy. It was a recognition by Rome of the necessity of adopting a new course to arrest reform. It convened in December, 1545, and adjourned in 1547. One of its first acts was to revoke the old method of the rule of the majority, and to order that the pope's consent was necessary to every decree. Reforms in a small way were ordered. The two principal reformatory measures were, that better teachers and preachers should be provided by the bishops, and that bishops should be punished for neglect of their duties. But, with these concessions, the work of reform ended. The general spirit of the council was relentless in its opposition to Protestantism. Many Italians escaped death. Owing to the difficulty of detecting them, so soon as they reached the Alps they were generally safe from arrest. Italy was an aggregation of little duchies and republics, which were often at war with each other, and this want of civil connection favored their escape. The larger Swiss towns and cities had little groups of fugitive Italian Protestants, who received a cordial welcome, and to whom avenues of trade and industry were opened. The canton of the Grisons, in the eastern Alps, was almost populated by them. Its population consisted of three folk stems, the old Rhetian, the Italian, and the German, and when the Protestants from the south took their place among them, they gave their impress to the faith and language of the whole people. A body of exiles from Locarno settled in Zurich, and established a Protestant service and organization there. Peter Martyr accepted an invitation of Cranmer to go to England, and became a professor in Oxford. Ochino also went to England, and preached in London. Exiles from Italy, likewise, among whom may be named Paolo di Colli, Grattaroli, Corrado, Teglio, Betti, Celso, and Curio, went to Basel and settled there. All these men were talented, some being authors who had made themselves objects of suspicion at home because of their heroic devotion, by pen and speech, to the new Protestantism. End of chapter 14.